Okay, welcome. Today we're going to talk about using the interactive shell to practice and test some of your code. The interactive shell is different than an editor in that it gives you immediate responses back. And so it's a good way to test things and troubleshoot stuff and practice. So let's get started. On all three platforms, Windows, Linux, and Mac, once you've installed Python, you'll get the idle program. So if I type in idle into Spotlight here, or in the search in Windows or Ubuntu, you'll be able to get it all three ways. Upon launch, the first thing it gives you is the interactive shell. So this is what we're going to be playing in right here. It's just this interactive shell, and you know that it's an interactive shell because it's got these three greater than signs prompting you to start typing. I will say real quick, if you're using a Mac, it's a little bit nicer to just use the terminal. So you can just open up the terminal, and then because Python's built into the system, you can just type Python, hit enter, and there you have an interactive shell ready to go. So that's an alternative if you're using a Mac. Okay, so let's start using it. So let's just start practicing. Now, one of the things you can do with this is practice these sheets that we have here on the website. So if I go to CS1400 on the CIT website, I scroll down to the bottom and I hit either week 3, week 9, week 6. Any of these PDFs, they're all the same except they just build on each other. Week 9 is longer than 6, and 6 is longer than 3. But any of this stuff, this is all the stuff you're going to be learning in this class. And you can test pretty much all of this in the shell to see how it works. So let's go ahead and test something. So let's just start testing some math. So I'm going to jump back over here to my shell, and I'm going to say, what's 34 plus 4? And as soon as I hit enter, it immediately gives me that response of whatever I just typed in, what it returns. So if I were to say num1 equals 34, and then I typed num_1 and hit enter, it'll give me the value of that variable. So num1 equals 34, num2 equals 3, and then num3 equals num1 plus num2, and if I were to print that to the screen, it'd give me 37. So there's some examples of just playing around with some math. Let's say I wanted to mess with lists. I know we haven't talked about lists yet in class, but we will soon. So if I wanted to play around with the list and see how that worked, this would be a good spot to do it. So I could say my list equals an empty list, and then I could say, at this point I could print that to the screen and it just comes up as an empty list. And I could say my list dot append. Let's say I want to put the name Bob in there. So I hit enter, I print it to the screen again, and I see that I have one item now in my list, and I have a string, and that string is Bob. So if I appended something else, append 343. Now what happens if I print that out? So now I have two items in my list. I have my first item is Bob, my second item is 3. Let's do a couple more. Append Charlie, and my list dot append Frank. So now if I print my list to the screen, I got Bob, 343, Charlie, and Frank. So now let's work with indexing through that. So what if I just wanted to print Charlie to the screen? So if I did my list sub 2, it gives me Charlie. If I did my list sub 0, it gives me Bob. What if I did my list sub -1? Give me Frank. Okay, so this is a way of testing indexing and testing lists, and really the shell is great for testing almost everything. You can't. It's harder to test, functions and things that start getting longer, but you can. Let's do an example of a function. So if I did def let's see, print something, and I passed it a string, and I said print my string. Hit enter twice to get out of that function. Now I have that function saved in memory. Now I can use that function. So I can say print something, and I can pass it Bob, and it will print Bob to the screen. If I passed it this is an awesome tutorial, and that is what it prints to the screen. So this is just a way of testing a lot of things. I'm going to encourage you to use this as much as you can. It'll help you to not only get used to typing things, but learning how things work. It will give you errors if you do things different, the way you're not supposed to. So if I did, if I spelled append wrong, it'll give me an error immediately and say list object has no attribute append. So it gives you some immediate feedback, and this is a way of testing to see if you're doing what you're trying to do the right way in your code. Okay, I'll stop it there, and I hope that helps. Thanks.